Okay, thank you everybody for joining us for another episode of Women in B2B Marketing. Today we have with us Allyson Havener, who is the SVP of Marketing and Community at Trust Radius. So excited to talk to you today. We have a lot to unpack, but thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Jane, for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah. We met a while, I think we met a while back briefly and on LinkedIn. We crossed paths slightly, but we actually got to talk and hang at Spring by Winter earlier this year. Great event. Everyone check it out. But Allyson presented on stage and I was like, I need to have her on the show. So she presented a ton of great data that Trust Radius was pulling from a ton of research that they're doing. She has fresh data that's hot off the press to share with us today. And then I'd love to go into how you're leveraging this data for your own marketing. So we'll get a little meta there. But before we dive down that path, Allyson, how did you get into the lovely world of B2B?
So I started my career at a company called LiveRamp, so in like the ad tech space. When I started, it was a 40-person startup, and I was kind of hired as a Swiss Army knife. There wasn't even a marketing department. So I did everything from like some of the HR stuff, which is kind of scary to look back on.
As you do in startup world.
Yes. Yes. I was like, I don't think I should be filling out this like visa, H-1B visa document, right. But okay. You kind of get, yeah, sounds good. And so pretty much anything that needed to be done. And they decided to bring on a VP of marketing, and she brought me over to the marketing department to run field marketing. So a big part of our strategy was going after the enterprise. We were trying to move up market. We knew at the time that like CRM retargeting for digital advertising was very new. And the only way that we could do that was really enable our sales team to break into these accounts. And we were really only working with kind of like the Fortune, like 5,000, 1,000 big advertisers. So field marketing was a big part of our strategy to break into, you know, like we knew like the Sephora's of the world, the Gaps of the world, Nordstrom's, like we had to have a very targeted approach. So I started my career kind of in field marketing. And then as LiveRamp grew, I was there for 8 years. And so we were acquired and then we IPO'd. And my career kind of grew with that. And as we scaled and revenue scaled, we saw the need for the business to really have an integrated approach when it came to marketing. So I ran full funnel marketing, reported into the CMO for a while and built a team there. And then about 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to kind of break from the big company life and go back to building. And I wanted to own the whole marketing function and kind of like test my go-to-market acumen when it came to building a team. So I went over to Trust Radius. So I've been there for the last 3 years and running marketing. So it's been quite the journey. But in marketing, you know, it's funny. I was a poli-sci major, so that's kind of like marketing, right?
I mean, honestly, yeah. I think I had one other guest who came from a political background too, and they compared it, and it did. I never would have thought before that conversation, but there's so many similarities between the two.
Definitely.
Your constituents and your ICP. It's just different language for very similar things.
Right. Your messaging is essentially your positioning, your messaging is your platform. There's a lot to it. So yeah, there's a lot that translated over.
So funny. Well, two things I noticed from that I'd love to dive into too, career-wise. You were at LiveRamp for between 7 or 8 years, you said? Is there?
Yeah, 8 years.
Wow. That's like a lifetime in marketing years, right? It's like dog years, 1 to 4. It's probably very similar for marketing years and how long you're at a company. What kept you there for that long of a ride? And what did you learn staying with one company through so many ups and probably some downs, but through acquisition and IPO, you saw the entire growth of this company. It's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, when you are part of a hyper growth company like that, that has, we just had an amazing product market fit, and I think what kept me there is that I essentially worked at like 3 different companies. So, that self startup mode when you're like 10 million in ARR, to then when we were acquired and part of Axiom, and we just saw that hyper growth from that 10, 20 to, 200 million in revenue. And then we actually sold off the Axiom business and then IPO'd. And so you just see that type of growth at a company. And I think the other thing is, and you really can't undervalue this in your career, is a company that really invests in you and in the people. I remember all the hiring that we did and all the interviews, and everybody would always ask me like, why have you been there so long? And, what keeps you there? And it's like, I believe this company really believes in me, and they've invested in my career so much and in my growth. And it has followed like the same trajectory as the company. And I think that's really what kept me there. And that's just part of my personality, is I always love being over my skis. I like being kind of like in that where I have no idea what's going on, but I'm going to figure it out. And they just kept giving me opportunities to succeed. And so I think that the investment in me and my career was probably the main reason. And I also really loved all the people I worked with. I think that's another thing. Like, I loved everyone that I worked with at LiveRamp.
Oh, it's so good. Any people leaders listening to this show, take note. Of course, a great product market fit, key for marketing. Yeah. Second, the people, enjoying the people you're spending so much time with. And third, just investing, feeling like your company is invested in you and your growth and is challenging you in great ways. Like, that just goes so far, because it doesn't, like you said, it feels like you were at 3 companies. It doesn't feel like you're stagnant, right?
Right.
So cool. Okay. Let's dive into your beautiful reports from Trust Radius. So everybody, we're going to kind of talk about this from 2 different angles. First, there's just some fun stats that she's shared before, and maybe some new stats you're willing to share, if fingers crossed, if you are. And then I want to go into, from a marketing perspective, how you're leveraging research and data and reports like this for your own content strategy, marketing strategy. So let's dive in.
Yeah. So the B2B Buying Disconnect Report, this is actually our 8th year publishing the report. And so I've been a part of this process for the last 3 years. And each year what we do is we survey all the buyers that come to Trust Radius, and to really understand, like, what are their, how do they want to buy? What are their expectations when it comes to interacting with the vendor? And then we also survey all the vendors that we work with, all the vendors on our site, to understand kind of their go-to-market strategy. And then we take those 2 data sets and then we start to analyze, like, where are the trends and where are the disconnects? And then we try to essentially remedy that. So what do you do to kind of avoid that big disconnect when it comes to your go-to-market strategy and the way buyers want to buy, essentially? Mm-hmm. And so the main thing that I always like to look at, and what I always find really interesting, is like, what is going to get buyers over the line to actually purchase? I think we've all experienced, the hesitation, the indecision, just the adherence to the status quo, and that's stalling deals. That's when, your win rates are starting to drop. And I think we're also starting to see our campaigns are, maybe less effective or efficient than they were in the past. And I think that's just this kind of shift that's been happening, mostly over, the last 5 years. We noticed that, over 70% of the buying committee identifies as a millennial or Gen Z. And I think that's a really important stat, because these are digitally native, right? They've grown up with social media. If you look at what's going on in the B2C world, they're used to getting all this product information at their fingertips. They want to look at what their peers are doing, what they're buying, and how influential those resources are to them. And that is transcending into the B2B world, where people are expecting easy access to kind of that, important product information. They don't want to talk to a salesperson until they're ready. And so it's interesting to see, like, those are kind of like those macro shifts that are happening, and just like the overall mindset that I think marketers are starting to catch up, but we're still behind in terms of, really speaking to this new buying persona that we have.
So true. And that's such an interesting stat about millennials and Gen Z. I'm curious, do you have it broken down what percentage is Gen Z versus millennials out of that 70%?
Yeah, so most of this of that 70%, the majority is millennials. So that makes sense. It's actually and this might be, we haven't really dove into this too much. So this is more of a observation where I think where there's been like a lot of layoffs happening, and we've all seen kind of the tech industry kind of trying to really think about cost effectiveness and getting to that break even model. We actually saw millennials grow in terms of that percentage of the buyer market, and Gen Z actually shrink a little. And I think that it is probably a correlation with recent layoffs.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was interesting to see. But millennials by far is the largest buying or kind of generational buying group.
Yeah. Are there any other trends that you're seeing? I mean, I hear anecdotally the number of people in a buying decision, right, has exponentially grown. I've heard different stats like 3x, 5x. It's an average of like 30 people. And I've heard crazy numbers. Do you have any info on that side of things?
Yeah, so it really depends. And so if you think about Just Radius, we really cater towards like the enterprise and mid-market. And so we break out the data a lot around like the enterprise and then kind of like the rest of the different cohorts. And so when you look at obviously in the enterprise, it's growing. But you actually see in like more like SMB and mid-market, it's actually the buying group is shrinking just slightly. And I think that is
because of the layoffs.
Yes. Yeah. And and you see that because what's happening is that in the enterprise, obviously it makes sense. Like you need to build that kind of collective confidence, and there's a lot of influence that needs to happen with the buying decision. We actually saw that within the enterprise. So the average is from 5 to 7 people in the buying group, and then when you get down to mid market and SMB, it was like 1 to 3. And also when you got to mid market and SMB, actually the time it took to get to a decision was shorter because of obviously, right, there's less people in the buying committee. So I think that's an interesting phenomenon where like, you have these really established enterprise that are still kind of have that little bit of like bloatedness, if you will, and the people that they have to influence will actually get a decision done. And then it's actually moving faster when you're when you're talking to SMB and mid-market, which totally makes sense, right?
Yeah. Less red tape, the smaller you are. You don't have to bring in legal and compliance and all the other teams as you grow. So true. Is there any other stat so 2 things that stood out to me from the report you presented or stats you were presenting at Spring there were top three. You had more than 3, but the top 3 were kind of more skewed than the rest. Top 3 things that make buyers more likely to purchase and top evaluation factors on review sites like Trust Radius.
Yeah.
Could you kind of go into those?
Yeah. So the top 3 things that make buyers more likely to purchase is, again, that easy access to product information. So people want to see pricing. They want some kind of demo where they don't have to talk to a salesperson. So I think this is really interesting is like, is there any kind of where they can see the product? It's like, it's a really kind of no-brainer when you say it out loud, but it's like the more under the hood information you can give to buyers, the better. And then the third thing is free trials, which I think is really difficult, again, thinking about the enterprise, but even these 3 held true: pricing, demos, and trials, even at the enterprise level. So thinking about how people can interact with your product and experience it and kind of get that hands-on experience before they even have to talk to you, the faster your sales cycle is going to go and the more qualified people are going to come into your pipeline. If you think about like efficiency of your team, if you have your AEs and BDRs talking to people that already know a lot about your product, they can really change their conversation to be more consultative. They don't have to have this, pitch, because people already know so much about your product. And so I think that it's kind of this like self-serve journey as marketers that we really need to create. And reviews are a big factor of that. So reviews and kind of like that social proof is a big, big factor when it comes to making a purchase decision. And so what we like to ask people is like, what is it though? Like what type of information that you want when you're looking at reviews and trying to learn from your peers? And the number one thing is reviewers want someone that's relatable to them. And that makes a ton of sense, because I want to talk to somebody that is running marketing at a similar sized company as to me, or has like a similar growth trajectory as me, because we're going to have essentially the same use cases, or we're going to have the same kind of problems. And so I want to know what they're doing. I want to know what my peers are doing. So that makes sense. The second is review content. So on average, buyers only read 3 to 5 reviews, and most of them read 3-star reviews. Because they know, you do this on whatever, consumer site that you're going on. I'm looking for I don't need like the promoters that are like, hey, I love this. This is the most amazing thing in the whole world. Or detractors that are like, 1 star. You want the middle ground, because those are usually the people that are going to give you the most information. So people are really looking at review content. They want the good, the bad, the ugly, and just to understand your product, because we all know products are going to have gaps, and that's okay. But it's actually better knowing those things going in, and you can have that conversation, and that's a good feedback loop for your product team, etc. And then the third piece of evaluation is, instead of like an aggregated score, buyers really like to see scores of like specific attributes or features. So, they look at like, okay, is it for the value, for the price, or, the different capabilities, how do they rank, and how do they rank against competitors? So they're really looking at the kind of attributes score, and then they look at that compared to competitors, which I think is really compelling when you think about your review strategy and really thinking about the quality and who's leaving that review. And are they like your prospective customers? Are they like your ICP of people that you actually want to be your customers?
Yeah. Oh, this is so important and top of mind for me right now, starting at a new company. And I feel like all B2B marketers always have reviews on their mind. It's so fascinating to me that people tend to go to the 3-star reviews, because I'm the one who goes to the 1-star reviews. I'm like, tell me how bad this can get, so I'm ready. Like, I brace for it. It's the same if I go to Yelp reviews or checking out a restaurant, Google reviews. I'm always looking at the worst case scenario. But that now I'm going to start looking at the 3-star and getting that balanced approach. Because you're right. Sometimes I'll see the 1-star and I'll read it, and I'm like, oh, this person set themselves up for failure. Like, I do think that sometimes. So maybe that's a reason to push me towards the 3-star reviews going forward.
Yeah. So, if you're leaving a 1-star review, you're probably pissed off, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, you're probably a little angry.
Sleep on it before you write the review. Yeah. Right. Pause and see if you feel the same way tomorrow. So funny. Is there anything, this is kind of going down the review path, but I'm curious, from being behind the curtains, what's the most important factor for us as marketers to keep in mind? Is it recency of reviews, frequency of reviews, total number of reviews? What are like some of the key things for us to keep in mind?
Yeah. So I think when you're looking at kind of just a segue off of like that 3-star review, cherry picking the people that are going to give you the 5-star reviews doesn't build brand trust, right? So I think when you're surveying, and a lot of people are like, okay, I'm going to take everybody that gave me a really good NPS, and those are the only people I'm going to ask for a review. And so I think when you're cherry picking, it does a disservice to you and ultimately the people that are going to be reading these reviews. And so in that same vein, I think people need to understand, like, negative reviews are okay. If that person's pissed off enough to leave you a 1-star review, you should maybe go back and reply to them and be like, and you see this on, I was actually last night, I was just on Airbnb, and I was looking at some places, and it's really about how people reply to that review. Like, sure, I went to this restaurant and I left a 1-star review because I was really upset. But then the restaurant wrote back to me and was like, sorry, this isn't how we want the experience to be. Thank you for the feedback, etc. And there's a way to reply to negative reviews that builds brand trust. And, I think that people get scared of that because they're like, oh, I don't want, somebody to see this. But I think there's power in having kind of a full range of customers that are leaving you reviews and all that feedback. Because again, buyers want to see that real feedback and that review and the quality and depth of that review content. And then I think when you get that negative review, reply to it and engage with that person if it's worth it, right? If you see value in it. So I think that's really important. And then to your point around recency, I think recency is important because you always right, your product is ever, like, if you think about how fast your product is changing and you're evolving and launching new things, align your review strategy to that. You don't need to be driving hundreds of reviews every quarter because you need to get some badge, right? It's like, look at your product strategy and your product roadmap and how things are evolving and how customers are experiencing that, and keep it recent so people are getting the most up-to-date information. Make it really about like the buyer and how they're going to, experience that when they go to your website and they see, your messaging around these product launches. And then when they see your review, you have content about it. Like, that's a really good experience. So think about recency more in this framework of like your product roadmap. And I think, so quantity matters to a certain extent. I think, again, going back to buyers only really reading 3 to 5 reviews, but they want to look at somebody that's relatable to them. So I would actually look more about the personas that are and companies and the companies that they're at that are reviewing you, and think about the quality of it. Because one thing is that if you're just driving a high quantity but low quality, that's not going to really do anything for you. Sure, there might be some scores and some aggregated scores, or you might be on some grid or something like that, but that's not really going to help buyers pick you off their short list, right? And so I think when you look at it, it's like, okay, buyers care about the in-depth quality and they care about somebody that's relatable to them. Like, how do we make sure that we have a good variety and that they're actually high quality? And then I think the best thing that we could do, and when I was on the vendor side of the house, is like, it was really hard to get our customers on the record because there were such high profile companies. And so if we got them to leave us reviews, I was like, I'm taking those quotes, I'm taking those references, I'm going to embed that across my entire website. I'm going to give it to my sales team. I'm going to use it in all of our marketing content. I'm going to use it in my ad creative. It's like, if you get this really good quality of reviews, it's like, they shouldn't just live on that review site. You need to take that content and use that across your channels.
Yes, good reminder. That typically take the content from a public review site and leverage that everywhere you can. That's so good. This could probably be going back to the report, but from a buyer perspective, do you have any intel on when they come to a site like Trust Radius? Is it typically when they already have their short list and they're just looking at Daxtra versus this company, or A company versus B company? Or is it, let me look up all the different companies I should look at in the HR space or HR tech space? Like, where is it a mix, or what are you seeing on the buyer side?
So 56% of the buyers that come to Trust Radius plan to make a purchase decision within the first 3 months. And so when you're in that 3-month cycle, you mostly have a short list and you're coming to the table to essentially evaluate what's on your short list. What we found is that people go with their first choice usually, And all the research that they do is to evaluate it and go to the buying group or their influencers within the buying group to justify their first choice. And so I think why this is so important is because if you look at the title, we always pick a theme for the report. And this year, it's really this kind of the year of the brand crisis. And what that means is that what we're seeing is that people that have like completely over-indexed on maybe the demand gen capture, and spent a ton of budget there, that is a really big disconnect that we see in the report. If you're not recognizable and if you are not building that brand trust and that preference with buyers, you're not going to make the short list. So you're not even being considered. And so by time they're already doing this, like, product research on Trust Radius, you're not even in these deals. And they're usually going to go with somebody, again, I know that brand. Oh, and I know the people that are using you, or the people that are using you are my peers. And so those are the two most basic heuristics that people make decisions with, which is, do I know them? And who do I know that's using that product? And that's really where brand is going to help you and kind of that amplification. And so you're starting to see where brands or vendors in the space that haven't been doing this, the market is so oversaturated and so confusing. People are going to go to the simplest answer, and that's usually your first choice. And then all the research that they do after that is just to convince the rest of the buying committee.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because you were mentioning how the buying decision and process has changed. I feel like back when I was starting in my career, this is a while ago, you created an Excel sheet, right? This was even like pre-Google Sheet, but Google Sheet, Excel sheet. And you put all the names that you could find or that you've heard of, but there was like 10 or more. And you wrote out, it was this whole matrix of everything, right? I don't see that anymore. Now it's really just you talk to your friends who are in similar positions, who have achieved certain goals, who you trust, and you get, 3 different tools from your close peer set, and you just look into those 3 because it's just so much faster. You have this trust. You're not blindly getting demos from 10 plus different companies and tools. So I wonder if we are just becoming, we're doing more with less, right? All the time, more efficient, more lazy, or just learning to trust our peer. I don't know. It's interesting because the process seems to have gotten longer, but our evaluation set is shorter.
Yeah. And so we kind of talked about the what makes buyers more likely, but also like what are the resources that they're using. And one thing that we saw jump up to the top of the list that wasn't even in top 5 years prior was people's own experience. And so I'm relying on my own experience to pick a product. And that's interesting because buyers now are more skeptical than ever before. They're super risk adverse. Again, going back to an idea that we had, and it's like, I would rather just adhere to the status quo to keep my job and try to bring in this like new innovative technology that like may or may not work or may or may not fit into our tech stack. And so there's just a lot of risk out there, and I'd rather go with the technology that I know works or that I used at a different company. And so I think it's really important that people are really investing in making their customers successful and making them advocates, because they're going to go to another company and you hope that they're taking you along with them.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. It's so much less friction, right? If you have used a platform before, already know the ins and outs, you don't need to retrain on a whole new platform and train your team. You can just bring that to the company you go to. It's so much easier. Yeah. Great points. Is there anything else that stood out to you from the survey? And I'm assuming by the time this comes out, it will be released most likely in the next couple of weeks.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the report will be live and you can access it at trustradius.com, and it's all ungated. We just want people to read the report. And so really excited for it to come out. But I think one thing that we kind of talked about this a little bit around like the short list kind of shrinking. And I think that says so much to how important brand awareness, that trust that you're building, and the transparency. And we've kind of talked about all three of those things. But the more you lean into obviously the transparency piece, that's product information, is like one thing that I looked at right when I got to Trust Radius was that we were looking at the sales cycle and we saw at proposal, all of a sudden we just had this big drop off. And I was like, our conversion rates are horrible after proposal. What's going on at proposal? Oh, they're seeing pricing for the first time. I'm like, they're getting all the way through this sales cycle and they don't even know pricing. And this is like 3 years ago. And so we changed our process where I was like, okay, BDRs, let's create a pricing page. Let's get pricing in front of them. First thing, hey, here's our pricing page. Here's the packages, FYI.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we don't get some of the people are like, hey, this actually isn't the right fit for me. But then you're not wasting time on them. Yeah. And then you get people, and all of a sudden our conversion rate was much higher at proposal. So you start to see these kind of like examples where it's like, and everybody listening has bought technology before. And how much better is it when you understand kind of at least even a price range, right? If that's going to fit into your budget before you even start having those conversations. Like nobody, to your point, we all have to do more with less, and time is the most valuable. So wasting time on products that don't fit into your budget doesn't really make sense. So I think there's things that, again, it's kind of like, oh, duh. And then the trust piece is interesting because it's so difficult to build brand trust because it's about being very consistent. It's about creating a brand and an emotional connection with your target audience, but it only takes one thing to break that trust. And so I think brand trust is really important, and we go into a lot of this in the report, but it really comes down to having your customers front and center, them telling the story for you, and again, like reviews, we were just talking about reviews and those 3-star reviews or negative reviews and responding to them, but it's being present in the market and creating a brand that people want to really align themselves in their careers to. So I think when you get into the report and you start to see kind of those 3 themes, it's really, really interesting how you can start to see, okay, great, I can take some of these findings of the report and really evangelize how we change our go-to-market to really to align ourselves with buyer expectations.
Yeah. I mean, already just from talking through this with you, I'm thinking I need to rethink who I'm sending over and asking to write reviews, like not just the NPS trigger that people have, right? The campaign, like everyone's an advocate, then you send them over to request a review. But maybe we need to branch that. I'd be scared to ask a detractor to go write a review, but maybe that middle group, we need to bring in that neutral group. So that's really fascinating. It's worth a test for sure. On that point with the scores, right, and how you typically get ranked on a review site, if you know this information either from the report or your own opinion from being behind the scenes, if let's say my company has a 3.5 on Trust Radius and 500 reviews, our competitor has 500 reviews as well, but has a 4.5. Do you see that making a difference, or is it really just the quality of the reviews or finding like somebody who resembles them, their lookalikes in the reviews? What do you think matters there? Is that a factor?
So in the data said that it's really the review content. And so looking at the reviews, understanding, what are the use cases that this product is solving for? Again, is that right for me and my size company? I think that's a really, really big factor, because if you look at, you're starting to evaluate technology and you see that they're more of an enterprise solution and you're an SMB, like that's a no-brainer, right? And so I think just when you talk about scores like that is not the biggest factor for them. If you actually look, it's like that and like awards ranked less than 5% in terms of buyers that like actually thought that that was influential information. And so it's interesting because that scares you. But as a buyer, you're still going to, you know, they still are competitors. So I'm still going to look at it and read through. And if I start to understand that your company actually services more of, you know, my use cases, my size company, and I'm reading reviews of people that are like me and my peers, right? That means more than just an aggregated score. Now you still have to have reviews, right? And the other thing, like on the ranking system on Trust Radius, we really focus on actually how much content is on there. So like your profile completeness, like do you have an up-to-date description? Are you showing pricing? Did you include some kind of demo? And so I think really we're positioned to really help the buyer, and we're trying to help the vendor align to those buyer expectations. So think about that when you think about your strategy. It's like, how do I think about what buyers want and giving them essentially that information up front, and that's going to help you build brand trust.
Yeah. So fascinating. I love all of this information. I'm definitely going to link to your report once you have it live so I can put it in show notes and read it all myself and dive in and nerd out. I want to get back kind of behind the scenes, but into your marketing world and how you leverage reports and amazing, valuable data like this to get in front of your audience, and how I'd love to see how you're leveraging that content, because there's so much noise out there right now with AI creating junk content, just breaking through that with something that actually adds value and people want to read and can skim and pull out their insights, right? How have you found that going, and how do you leverage that with your team?
Proprietary research is going to be gold. I mean, just original content, even if you like, even backing up to like reviews, like original content that's written by your customer is going to become more and more important. You know, I look at Trust Radius, and the two things that we like really, really care about is like that fraud detection and the quality of the reviews, because we know how important that content is and how hard it is going, like, it's only going to become more and more, content in general is going to be more and more commoditized. So original content is only going to grow in importance. And so our proprietary research is really important to us. And it's pretty much the backbone of our marketing strategy as we go forward. So we take all of the learnings, and like I said, like pricing with, like, we know pricing, interactive demos. We partnered with a company called Screen Space that has built all of our interactive demos. They're actually creating like an interactive demo of the report. Cool. And yeah, so I think, so proprietary research is just really important. We're really lucky that we have an internal research team. They're actually the ones that kind of like maintain the taxonomy of our site, making sure that, you know, products are in the proper categories. Where are we missing products? Where do we need to build a new category? You know, and then they also help us with our research. And so we take this report, we slice and dice it into, you know, it's so dense. So you kind of have to turn it into like at least 20 pieces of content to kind of deep dive into all of the concepts that we're covering. But really, like I said, this fuels our messaging all the way from top of funnel macro trends that are happening in the market, all the way down to like using helpful stats in our sales deck and in the sales process. So really, this report is kind of the backbone of our go-to-market strategy. And also, we use all this research on how we build Trust Radius, and like, what do buyers want? Okay, great. They want to understand, you know, how do we make reviewers more prominent? How do we make it show that they're like experts in their field? You know, so I think there's a lot that we take from this report. It's not just our marketing, but also our product strategy and our product roadmap as well. So this report's really important to, you know, our company. It's a very, very big deal, but it really fuels how we also like position and message in the market as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you leverage it for the product roadmap too. So taking, okay, how are buyers buying? where is there a gap in what we're offering to them and closing that and focusing on other features. Very cool. What do you see from the reports you've published so far with Trust Radius? Where is the most traction coming from? Is it, and take traction however you see fit, is it pipeline or volume or whichever? Because it's ungated, you mentioned, right? So it's traffic coming to your site, and then I assume we're hoping for hand raisers, right? And new customers pipeline, of course, at the end of the day, we all want. So what has made the biggest impact in as a piece or a distribution channel for the report?
So when I think about the report and really our goal, and like if you think about just the report, it's like all I care about is consumption of the report, because and all the different facets of it, because we're trying to change perception and we're trying to change the way the industry thinks. So if you think about the name of the report, the disconnect. So we're trying to bring to light buyer expectations and how they want to interact with the brand, and then the disconnect between like a vendor's go-to-market. So our ultimate goal is just consumption and to change that perception, and to change people's mindset. And that's really difficult. And that's really hard to measure. So there's, so the main measurement is consumption when we think about traction of the report. How are people using this? One thing that we do, and people will be able to access this, is we create a media kit. And so you can download, we write kind of like hot takes, top 10 takeaways. We have all the graphs and all the charts available. So, and that's all free to access. So you can just download the chart. You can download kind of the synopsis of the chart. We create a whole a whole deck for like marketers or sales leaders that they could use for like their sales kickoff if they want to use the data to help drive change within their organization. So we really try to make the data and the key takeaways really accessible for people to use and embrace. And again, it goes back to like changing this perception, changing an industry to think about, okay, how do I really meet buyers where they are?
Yeah. Oh, I love this. It's so it is a couple of thoughts here. It's reminding me, I love that you have a media kit, so you make it easier for people to share internally and hopefully publicly too, right? To spread the word. It's reminding me of back in eMarketer days. Do you remember from like 10 years ago, they always had those reports, those black and red reports where you could change the colors. I was in the agency world at the time, working with LiveRamp often, but we'd always pull reports and change the colors and pull what we needed from the data. So that's awesome that you're providing that, those, take these stats and share them as you wish. Very similar. Very cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's helpful. I mean, you're, again, going back to like proprietary research is going to be harder and harder to find. And so the more that you can use third-party validation to get your points across and the change management that you're trying to drive in your organization, the better. So that's really our goal, and that what we see in terms of traction in the market.
Do you, for reports like this, is it mostly survey-based, and do you work with a vendor or do in-house?
We do it all in-house. So we've, and it's all survey-based. We have in the past worked with an agency more on the writing side of the house, but then we brought it back all in-house. We like I said, because we've produced this report over the past 8 years, we do have kind of like that residency expertise, which is great. So we're really lucky. I think if you wanted to use an agency, there's definitely some great content agencies out there, even like PR agencies, depending on, who you're working with. But there's some really good PR agencies out there too that will help marketers with research. Again, you're still getting that kind of like third party validation. But I think it goes back. Okay, if we go back to, what it's saying in the report about kind of that brand awareness and building that brand authority, a report is a great way to do that, because it shows that you have a POV in the market. You're either creating or aligning yourself to macro trends that are happening in the market, and you're helping educate essentially your target audience about it. And so if you're thinking like, okay, how do I build more brand and how do I work that in there? A good way is to shift some budget. Think about how you can create content that is, again, aligning to what's going on in your industry.
Yeah. Oof. I'm getting so many ideas for how we need to. I've already talked to my CEO about creating proprietary research, and we need our own just bespoke content that we're creating in that front. But to break free from all that noise, but you're giving me so many ideas on what to focus on. So thank you for getting the gears turning here. We had a million more things to dive into, but I think I love that we went deep into reviews and behind the scenes, how you're leveraging this research. So thank you for sharing both sides with us. It's all, I think, very valuable. One thing I'd love to end on is if you could go back in time, so 10 plus years ago when you're first starting at LiveRamp or pre-LiveRamp, what would you share with yourself that you know now, or would you change anything?
That's a great question. And you always look back at your younger self and you're like, oh my gosh, how did it? I don't even remember. You kind of black it out, honestly. I was like, I don't even remember how I said that.
Who's that person?
Yeah. I think I would, there isn't much I would change because I feel like you're always learning from your mistakes. And I think that's one thing, especially if you're earlier in your career, we're all making mistakes at all times. I think the main thing is I used to get really, really upset with myself if I made this mistake and I wanted everything to be executed perfectly. And I learned very quickly that it's actually better to fail fast, learn, and then move on. And I think it gets really difficult for marketers out there because you're constantly under pressure of, are you driving growth for the company? Are you doing this? And you get bogged down really, really quickly in defending yourself. And then you're like, you don't want to trip up. You don't want to make a mistake because you feel like you're already on thin ice and you're already trying to justify this program. But I always tell my team, I'm like, phase one, just get it done. Let's just get it out there. And you know what? No one's going to die if something's not perfect.
We work in marketing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think learning from and that also just shows that you're adaptable, especially in the tech world. You have to be able to move fast. You have to be able to move and learn from those mistakes. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not moving fast enough. You're going to get left behind. And so I think when I look back at early in my career, I was, hesitation. It's like this, like hesitant. You're like, okay, is this right? Is this right? And it's like, but I learned very, very quickly to have that confidence in myself, be okay with messing up and learning from it, and then moving on really quickly and growing from that. And I think that's what really helped me in my career. And it's really the confidence piece of it. Having that confidence, walking into the room and being okay that you don't have all the answers, but you have some, and maybe that's all that matters. Yeah. So really encourage a lot of people at any stage of your career to be okay messing up, and learning from that and moving forward.
I love that. I love pulling quotes from people, and every time I'm like, oh, that's a good one. That should be a sticker. Sorry if listeners hate that. DM me and tell me to stop saying that should be a sticker. I will stop. And I promise I will make these stickers. But for you, phase one, just get it done. Yeah. That needs to be a sticker on your laptop. I love it.
That couldn't be more accurate.
Right? I love it because it's also, I feel like so much has changed in the past 10, 20 years that when I was first starting out, you couldn't mess up, right? It was like you had this mentality of you have to know everything. You can't ask questions. It was very like strict, right? And so we got this perfectionism kind of drilled into us, and it delays things. And now, thankfully, I love that things have sort of loosened up, and we're enabling our teams to make mistakes. You have to make mistakes. That's how you learn. Like you said, no one's going to die from this. Knock on wood. It's a marketing campaign. We are not surgeons, which, we can still make big impact on the world, but it's a lot lighter. So let's move faster, iterate, learn, and keep going from there. But phase 1, just get it done. You heard it from Allyson. Well, thank you for joining us today. This was so amazing. Love the deep dive here. And there's so much more we can cover. If you come back in a future episode, we'll talk about more topics. But thank you so much for joining us today, Allyson. And we'll link to the report in show notes for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jane. This was so fun.
Yay. And thank you, everyone, for listening. If you made it this far, write a review. Leave us, reviews. It's the theme of today. Write us a review. You hear how important it is. Hopefully not that 3-star, but if that's how you feel, leave it for us. It's okay. And just share with a friend, share the love, and get more people listening to our show. We appreciate it. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great day.